I just tell the truth, and telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies.
Hello guys, welcome to the Mill Press, a time capsule for everything Bible related. We have been breaking down the book of Esther chapter by chapter, seeing what God has to say through his word through this book. We finished chapter 7 last week, where we see Haman's plan come to an end. And what do we find? The husband's fury, symbolic of God's concern, love, and jealousy for you. We saw that when Haman saw his wife being molested by Haman, he had him killed. And now chapter 8 steps into what happened right after this event. So we're going to begin chapter 8, which we title Law, Order, and Covenant. Again, law, order, and covenant. Keep that in mind because it's such an amazing picture of how God and just how a simple word from God can restore your life. Chapter 8 begins with Esther bringing Mordecai into the king's presence, and then she tells him that Mordecai, the man that he had just honored a few hours prior, is actually her cousin, and more so, he has been like a father to her. So imagine Xerxes, right? Imagine what's going on. He knows Mordecai saved his life, right? From the two men that conspired to kill him and so forth. So he knows Mordecai saved his life. So he knows Mordecai is an honorable man. But on top of that, now he gets to meet his wife's extended family, his cousin, who is like a father to Esther, right? Which will make Mordecai Xerxes' father-in-law by way of adoption. Xerxes, who became a king after his father Darius had passed away. So Darius is now gaining a family member. He's gaining a man that he can trust, someone that is honorable, and most of all, a father, which is a wild concept because you realize that he is taking up to this position, not because of where he was born, not because of anything that he was born with or has, but only because of his character. So Xerxes sees this, and you see in verse 1 and 2 that he basically, what he does is he takes Haman's state, all his property, all his belongings, and he hands it over to Esther. And then he takes away the king's signet ring, right? The one that symbolizes the king's power, and gives it to Mordecai. And then he appoints, and then Esther has Mordecai, her father, he has them appointed as the head of the state. Basically, she gets everything that Haman had, and then she gets all that property and makes Mordecai and gives him the power of attorney. He's saying, listen, all this property is for you to control. Man, how beautiful is that? That you see Mordecai, the man that has said the very least amount of words, but shown the most amount of action through his character, be promoted to a position beyond that he could ever ask for. And that's really what God does. And I kid you not, I'm reading through this chapter and I'm reading through this moment how Haman is handed over all of this power, all of this property, all of this large state. And all I'm thinking about is Isaiah 22. Because in Isaiah 22, there's a prophetic calling where God sees the people that are in charge, these rulers that are not doing the right thing. And then he says that I'm going to send somebody. I'm going to send somebody that's going to be able to do the right thing, that he has the character that I need in order to take care of my people. And Isaiah 22 says, you're going to hand your authority over to him, and he will be a father. And the shoulder and on his shoulders, the keys of the house of David will rest, and the doors that he opens, no one can shut. And he's saying, I'm going to send somebody that's going to have the power to open doors nobody else can open. Look at Mordecai. He was begging outside the king's gate a few chapters ago, and right now he's in the king's presence, being blessed with an amazing amount of property and power. He has the ring of the king. Understand that that is a symbol of his authority, and at the same time a symbol of his lineage, saying like, hey, you are part of my royal family. Man, when God opens a door for you, I'm telling you, nobody can shut it. And that person that Isaiah 22 was talking about is none other than Jesus, because he can make a way when there's no way. He can make a way out of deliverance. He can make a way for ownership. He can make a way for inheritance. He can make a way in ways that nobody else can. And this is what you see in the first and second verse of chapter 8, that you see God can take whatever is going up against you, and he can open a door that you would least expect, and make a way for you to be blessed, to be secure, to be empowered, and to receive the things that God has ordained for you. He makes a way. That's verses 1 and 2. Which it really had me just going over just the concept of just how God can really just hand you something. That's the concept of grace, that you didn't work for it, but he gives you. He gives it to you freely because somebody else already paid the price. Esther takes this time, and then it says that she dropped to her knees and she begged the king to overrule, to revoke, to change the law that Haman had put in place to kill all the Jews on December 13. She's saying, please, can you change this law? Can you go back? Can you overrule it? The law, the decree that Haman the Agagite had put in place. And when I read that, I finally understood why was Haman so set on killing all the Jews. Because it wasn't just Mordecai. He wanted to kill every single Jew. Chapter 3 ends with him sipping on some wine, listening to the cries of the Jews, knowing that they're going to be killed. So you got to figure out, why does Haman hate the Jews so much? And then from the name Agagite, you get to see this is something that extends all the way back to the book of Genesis, right? Because in the book of Genesis, you see the birthplace of someone, an Agagite, from the lineage of Esau. So now let me give you guys a little bit of a little break from, let me give you some history as to why the name Agagite is so important. In Genesis 36, you see Esau's son have sex with a prostitute. Well, a concubine, which is an exclusive prostitute, right? This man sleeps with this prostitute and has a son named Amalek. Now, Amalek, because he is the son of a prostitute, of a concubine, cannot legally inherit any of the estate of Esau. That's important because what ends up happening is, over the course of time, the family lineage of Amalekites, ended up just living in the desert. Why is that important? Because when Israel was enslaved in Egypt, later on in Exodus, like you see that God brings them out, makes a way, because God always makes a way and open doors where no one else can open them. He makes a way for them to come out of slavery. And in Exodus 17, it says that they were ambushed by the Amalekites. Okay, so what's going on here? Israel just left Egypt. They have been liberated by the very power of God, and they are wandering the desert. And who lives in the desert? Nomads, known as the Amalekites. And they're nomads because legally they have no right to a land. So they settle in the desert, and when the people of Israel were leaving Egypt, they decided to ambush them in Exodus 17. Now, later on, you go to the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 15. You see the same thing. Now you see God telling Saul, hey, Saul, remember when my people were leaving Egypt and the Amalekites ambushed them? I haven't forgotten that. I haven't forgotten who hurt my people. I haven't forgotten who hurt the people that I love. I want you to go there now and destroy them. And then you see that the people of Israel mount up and go against all the Amalekites. And it says they drive them all the way out to almost to the very edge of Egypt. And the last person standing is this king named Agag, which is where you get Agagite. So what is it really saying? When we say Haman the Agagite, what is it actually pointing back to? It points to a prophetic promise, because 1 Samuel 15 ends with a promise from God saying the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. But he also says the name Amalek will be removed. So then if the name Amalek is removed, but there's going to be an ever-ending war. with the Amalekites, what name will they pick? Well, the last name of the king was King Agag. And therefore you have the Agagites. So I would dare to say that this is the descendants of Amalek, even to this day, waiting for the right time to finally destroy Israel. Look how crazy it is. Like, you have a generational family feud that from generations to generations has been, I want to attack these people. I want to hurt these people. I want to destroy these people. And can I tell you something? That's exactly how spiritual forces work against you. That for generations and generations, their main goal is to destroy you. Their main goal is to set you apart. Their main goal is to completely, utterly kill you. Jesus says the thief, like the enemy comes to kill and to steal and to destroy, because there are these forces that have set themselves against you like Agagite. But man, here comes God and he says, listen, whatever they have tried to do to you, it will be done to them. Notice how Haman was impaled with the very thing that he wanted to impale Mordecai with. Look how amazing God is, that he uses the very weapon set against you to destroy your enemies. This is why the Bible teaches that no weapon against you will prosper, but also when people bless you, they will be blessed. And when people curse you, they will be cursed. That you have such a reassurance that no matter what happens or who comes up against you, you know that there is a promise of God that he will protect you. And you see that, like, even though you have Haman with his generational hatred, you see God with his generational blessing. The story really, I love the way God says it. He says it like, he says, I will punish the Amalekites for what they have done to Israel when they ambush my people coming out of Egypt. Look how amazing it is. And again, the word of God, right? Because when we look at chapter 7, you see that as soon as it left the king's mouth, Haman was apprehended and killed. The power behind his word and his authority. It's an amazing concept to know that no matter what comes up against you, just know your Father in heaven, the King of Kings, is on your side because you have chosen to side with him. Now, verses 5 and 6, I'll be honest, I thought it was a bit dramatic. Because in verse 5 and 6, you see Esther begging, and then she's like, if it pleases the king, oh, please, oh, how can I bear to see my people die? And then it, a little bit over the top, in my opinion, right? And I was completely going to dismiss it, right? But again, I owe it to God and I owe it to the fact that I am trying to break this down as accurately as possible. I could not get this verse out of my mind. I cannot bear to see the destruction of my people. Listen, that was resonating with me. And this is how I know the Holy Spirit works within my soul. Because as I'm there, it's almost like, Adil, how do you think I feel about my people? And once that I got that message, I understood Esther is trying to show the heart of God. Like the book of Jonah. In the book of Jonah, it's such a small book, 4 chapters, the simplest thing. But the very last chapter, the last few sentences, God sees this group, this whole nation that is doing wrong, wicked, evil practices. And then he sends a prophet to get them to change their ways so that they can turn back to him and he can then bless them, right? And the prophet he sends gets mad at God. He's like, why would you send me to these people? These people are bad. These people are wrong. These people do X, Y, and Z. They don't deserve it. And God's response is, how can I not care about these people when they don't even know their right from their left? And you get to see such a compassionate, merciful God in that statement, because he's saying when you are lost and lost in wickedness and sin, doing the worst of things, God cannot bear to see you in that state. He cannot bear to stand and think, if you keep going down this path, you're going to end up in hell. You're going to end up being completely destroyed and away from my presence. I cannot stand to bear to see this. So when you see Esther begging, oh, I can't bear to see my people be destroyed to the king. Man, you get to see the heart of God like you did in Jonah, and you see it in Jesus. That Jesus is being crucified, nails in his hands after being whipped, beaten, destroyed physically. And then amidst all of that, he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. It's such an amazing picture that God is always putting the need of others, right? Trying to prevent the destruction of another, even at the sake of his own son. So it's like, how can God, if he's all loving, stand to bear us live in sin, knowing that that leads to hell? He can't. And this is what Esther is saying. How can I bear this? How can I withstand seeing the destruction of my people? And imagine God saying that to you, that you're walking down the cliff and he knows it's a dead end and you're going to die. And he says, how can I stand to just let you walk off that cliff? I can't. And this is what you see when Esther says, how can I stand to bear my people perish? And even though that's correct, I'll be honest, this is in this verse, you get to see Esther's one and only mistake throughout the entire book of Esther. It is by far her greatest mistake, right? Because if you notice, she tells the king, can you overrule the decree? Can you overrule the command? Can you change your mind? Can you go back on your word? And if you get to understand what that means, it's basically saying, hey, can you make this order for the sake of my people? Right? Because throughout the book of Esther, what you see is that the king's word is finite. Whatever he says, it is done. Whatever he commands, it is done. No matter what it is, no matter how crazy it is, he put that because of that signet seal, he says all Jews will be killed. They were all crying because they knew it was going to be done. Because he said to Vashti, hey, listen, you need to go and you can never enter my presence. He kept his word. And now Esther is telling her, hey, can you overrule? Can you go back on your word? And let me tell you why that's such a big deal. Back in those days, the word of the king was law. And without law, the only thing you have left is chaos and disorder. If you can add and retract and change the law over and under and however you want, it's no longer law. So when Esther says overrule, change, she is basically saying, hey, can you cause disorder for the sake of my people? Can you go back on your word for the sake of my people? And that is not correct, because the whole point of Vashti being removed is because they wanted to make sure that there was no disorder in the houses and in the marriages and in the kingdom. The whole theme of the book of Esther is obedience, order, and preventing chaos and disorder. So when she says, can you go back on your word? She is now inviting that very nature of disorder. It's her one biggest mistake. And let me tell you something. If you look at Xerxes' response, he never goes back on his word. And I love that, because if a king from earth keeps his law and keeps his word, how much more the King of heaven? How much more the King of kings, right? Because if you look at Numbers 23, it says, God is not a man that he should lie, nor son of man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? Basically, God doesn't go back on his word. Man can, man do, man lie, man do things, promise things that they cannot fulfill. But God, he's not like that. He doesn't go back on his word. And you see Xerxes exemplifying what it is to be a king, right? And this is exactly why Jesus later on comes in and says, hey, don't think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. What is he saying? He's saying a king does not go back on his word. He does not go back on his law. In the same way Jesus came and he did not come to change the law, the Old Testament, all the regulate. He didn't come to change it. Nah. He came to fulfill it. So this is why it's such an important practice to keep your word, right? Because a king cannot change his mind. His word is law. And this is why, even if you notice in chapter 2, when the king casted Vashti out of his presence, right? He said, because of her disobedience, you can never enter my presence. It says that when his fury subsided, he remembered Vashti and he missed his wife. He missed her. And then, even though he missed her, he did not break his word. He said, you cannot enter my presence. And even if I miss you, even if I want to see you, I can't break my word. So he could not see Vashti. And this is the thing. This is, again, such a beautiful concept, because when you look at Psalms 15, it says that you keep your oath, you keep your word even when it hurts. That's a concept people don't have nowadays. That you can keep what you said, keep your word, despite if it hurts you, despite if you lose because of it, despite if people don't like you for it. Keeping your word. And then he says to Esther, listen, Esther, no document written in the king's name and sealed with his signet can be revoked. He's saying, I can go back on it. I can change my mind and go back on it. It can never be revoked because it has my name. It has my seal. It has everything that I stand for. My word is law. I cannot change it. Instead, the king replies to Esther and to Mordecai. Xerxes tells them, and he says, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled them on the pole he set up for Mordecai. Now, write another decree, Mordecai, in the king's name and on behalf of the Jews as what seems best to you. For, keyword, no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. But wait, wasn't the decree and the command in chapter 3 under the king's name and signet under his name? So, is he going to revoke it? Is he going to overrule it? What is he saying? He is adding to it. He's saying, hey, you can attack the Jews like Haman, but you risk losing everything you have like Haman did. And by the way, the same weapon that Haman used on the Jews was the weapon that was used onto him. He doesn't void it. He doesn't nullify it. He doesn't go back on his word. He doesn't go overrule the command or the decree. He adds another, exposing the repercussions of those who exercise the first decree. When I tell you, look how amazing Xerxes is, that he says, I cannot break my law or my command because doing so brings chaos and disorder. Instead, I'm going to add another. And if you fulfill the first, you will also fulfill the second, right? You can kill the Jews if you want and take their possessions, but just know that the highest noble who did that got himself killed and his entire estate given to another. Tell me that is not amazing, that no matter how far you go, God has made it that if you break the first law, your second will pay the repercussion. And let me tell you something. When you look at that, you see that the second law, the second decree, was a byproduct of fulfilling the first, right? So you see how I just mentioned how Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, but came to fulfill it? Well, once he fulfilled it, what did he do? He added another covenant as a byproduct of fulfilling the first covenant. This is why in Luke 22, in the Last Supper, he says, this is a new covenant in my blood poured out for you. Hebrews 8 says, by calling the covenant new, he made the first one obsolete. What does that mean? It means that the second is a byproduct of fulfilling the first. Just like Esther, but now God puts a whole new twist, because in Esther chapter 8, we see a byproduct of one to another that leads to death. But with Jesus, we see the byproduct of one to the other bringing forth life. right? And you see a fulfillment. So let me give you guys a little bit of insight as to why is Christianity so different from most every other religion, right? Imagine it like this, as far as fulfilling the first and the second. Imagine I tell you that you can work for 4 years to get a PhD and gaining all the knowledge that you need in order to receive that specific degree, right? But you never complete the 4 years. Now imagine this is the first covenant, right? That you can work to try to gain this knowledge for these 4 years, but you never actually finish it. But now imagine I tell you, just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, that you can be born again and you can be born with all the knowledge of a PhD. So you have everything that you will have learned those 4 years. You were born with every knowledge, everything that you need in order to truly be a doctor, right? Will you go back to school to study what you already know? It wouldn't make any sense because the second has fulfilled what the first had ordained. So when you look at Xerxes, he doesn't revoke the decree, he adds to it. And he basically is mentioning and trying to show you when the first one is fulfilled, it leads to the other. And Jesus, by the same nature, says, when I fulfill the old covenant and those laws and regulation, I can bring forth another, right? An amazing concept. When I tell you it just really made me fall in love with the concept of like the Old Testament and the New Testament, God's law and Jesus' law of the Spirit, two completely byproducts of each other, but such an amazing concept. And in between all of that, you get to verse 9. Because in verse 9, again, you see that in the previous verses, Xerxes added the repercussions of you fulfilling the first, and now this is the repercussions to the second. But he then does even more. It says in verse 9 that he makes a charter, a legal document granting rights to the Jews, written by none other than Mordecai himself. According to the king, write what you think is best, Mordecai. And what does Mordecai write? He basically, in verse 11, gives the Jews the right to assemble, which, when you read it, is exactly the First Amendment of the United States. He gives them rights to protect themselves and protect their home, which is the Second Amendment of the United States. And the third thing he says, and they have a right to protect their property, which is the Fourth Amendment of the United States. So what is Xerxes doing and what is Mordecai then putting into practice? Xerxes not only adds to the decree, but that he also empowers the people through the law that originally was leading them to the slaughter. That which was death now is fulfilled, and now it being fulfilled, it empowers. The same law that was meant to kill them now is giving them the power to overcome their very situation, which is, it just screams, again, just the idea how beautiful God is in this. Because when you read the book of Romans, chapter 2, when God talks about the old covenant and the new covenant, right? Of religion versus relationship, to put it into context. He says, when you naturally do what the law requires, you become a law unto yourself. What does that mean? It means that religion tells you you have to do this. But our relationship tells you you want to do this. And you start seeing that the heart issue that we talked about last chapter is resolved when God puts in you his law. Man, it's just like the picture of God's perfect plan of redemption over and over through this chapter. You get to see such an amazing twist from law to grace, from religion to relationship, from a situation of oppression and death to a position of power, liberty, and justice. That's what God does. And let me tell you something. When I was like reading through this, I started looking at the dates because Haman set the decree and everything and saying to kill the Jews on January 13. And then he says this decree is to be exercised on December 13th. Basically, at the end of the year, we're going to kill all the Jews. And it was only on March 23rd that you see Haman is killed, and then Mordecai is put in power, gets the ring, and this whole chapter 8 happens, which means it's been 8 weeks since Haman put out this decree to kill the Jews. And man, when I tell you something, I really sat there because I know when you look through the Bible, when you look through the book of Esther, you see the power behind the king's word. That if he says, he will do. There is such an amazing power behind the word of God. This is why we read the Bible, because it speaks of the word Jesus of God, right? And let me tell you, all it takes to change your position, to change where you stand, to change whatever it is a word from God. When you look at the Jews in chapter 8, they were waiting for 8 weeks. And the fact is, there's some of us that are waiting for a promise. We're waiting for a better future. We're waiting for our health to be better. We're waiting for wealth. We're waiting to leave poverty. Maybe we're waiting for love, for peace, for security. But all I can tell you is it just takes one word from the king to completely change your life around. And let me tell you, it's the most beautiful concept of this book, that you see that there's a king that is unwilling to change his mind on what he has said about you. And tell me about this king. You saw the king's fury last chapter. He loves you. You see God acting on his behalf, even from generational cursing. You see generational blessing, that the Agagite could not overcome the blessing of the Jews. Man, how God can take you from a position of poverty, and you can be on your knees down to your last straw, and he can make a way. He can make a way for you to go straight to the king, to be put in the position of authority and power, not because of what you do, but because of the character that you possess, a character that comes when you are born again. When the first is fulfilled, the second comes alive. And the thing is, I know sometimes it's hard to wait. It's hard to wait when you see corruption, when you see disorder, when you see chaos. But I'm telling you, all it takes is a word from the king. I will leave you guys with this before we end the chapter. Habakkuk 2, verse 3. I love this verse because we always talk about the promise of God. We always talk about the perfect timing. I love this verse, Habakkuk 2:3, because it says, for the revelation, right? So the finished product, the revelation of what has been promised, the final outcome of what he has said. It says, awaits an appointed time, that God has put a specific time for these things to happen. And it speaks of the end, and it will not prove false, that God will not be made a liar. Whatever he said, it will be done. It says, though it lingers, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. Man, how beautiful. Because let me tell you something. Understand how it says it. Though it lingers, it will not delay. But if it lingers, does that mean that it delays? No, it means that it may feel like it's delayed. You may feel like it's lingering, but it will not. It will come at the appointed time. So ask for a word from the king and watch him change the situation. Ask a word from him and watch him do something impossible in your life, because chapter 3 ended with Haman sipping some wine, enjoying the bitter weeping of the Jewish people. And chapter 8 ends with the people filled with joy, filled with gladness, because it says that now they were ready. Now they were empowered. They were law-abiding citizens to avenge themselves to their enemies. And who is your enemy? Look how Jesus said it. It says, this is how Paul said it. He said, our struggle, our fight, our war is not against people. It's against principalities, forces, spiritual forces that set themselves up against you. But what has happened through the book of Esther of people that have become your enemies. They are destroyed. And now, because God sent his son to fulfill every law, he now says, now that I have fulfilled it, I can empower you to go ahead and take revenge on these forces that have come up against you. I will empower you to take dominion, to take possession, to make sure you win back what has been lost. Whether that be your family, whether that be your mind, whether that be your health, or whether that be just your finances, whether that be your soul, or that just be someone that you care about. God can restore if you just ask and you get a word from the King. How amazing is that? Chapter 8 of the book of Esther blew my mind, and I hope it does it for you as well. A word from the King is all that we need to change today's families, nations, countries, the world. You can do this not because you have the strength to do it, because Mordecai had none except that which was given by the King. And we serve the King of Kings. So I hope you guys enjoy Esther chapter 8. It has been an amazing journey. We're down to our last 2 chapters. We'll talk again soon next week. Take care and thank you for listening.